In today's episode of Summer of Sega, we're going to be looking at Panzer Dragoon 2. The main character in Panzer Dragoon 2 is Jean-Luc Lundy, who comes from a superstitious village that hunts down mutant Kulias to avoid the bad omen of the eerie green glow emanating from their throats. Lundy finds himself unable to kill one of the creatures, fascinated by its bizarre luminescence and its prepubescent stubby wings. He hides and secretly raises the creature, sneaking it out occasionally to let it stretch its growing wings and learn to fly as he trains it to allow him to ride it. While on one of these excursions, Lundy's village is decimated by a huge white ship. Laggy, as he so named this creature that he saved and raised, reveals that the strange green glow is the source of powerful arrows of light, not unlike that of the lost dragons of the ancient age. Together, they take off after the giant ship in search of revenge and end up embroiled in an action-packed mystical adventure against an empire. The world of Panzer Dragoon 2 is comprised of dark, earthy tones, with lots of blues and grays, and interesting character designs and creative architecture, along with a haunting soundtrack that quickly rises to an adrenaline-pumping action tone that retains the general, sort of RPG-ish, epic, big adventure tone of the entire game. The game's controls give you the sensation of flying. It really feels like you're actually guiding your dragon along rather than directly controlling it. A challenge for video games as a whole is to make the game feel like a natural extension of the body, rather than a disconnected pressing of buttons. This level of immersion is not typically found in such arcade-style on-rail shooting games like this, but somehow Panzer Dragoon 2 pulls it off better than most games I've ever played. You can attack by rapidly pressing the fire button for quick individual shots, or you can hold down the fire button and move the cursor across different enemies to auto-target them and release the button for a wide spread shot. These two variations of attacks really have two different purposes. One, if you're faced against, just a couple different enemies or a really strong boss heading right towards you, you might want to just use the quick individual fires, versus a huge spread of enemies or an enemy that has multiple target points along its side. You can really use the hold down and use the auto target to get lots of shots and take down lots of targets at once. A berserk shot is built up by a green indicator above your health bar. Unleashing this powerful fury is enough to take down multiple enemies at once or do massive damage to a boss. The basic premise of the gameplay of Panzer Dragoon 2 is an on-rails shooter, You don't really control the path that your dragon takes, it just automatically keeps moving forward, but you can affect its movement by slightly nudging it left or right and completely turning around using the L and R triggers to spin your body around as you ride on top of the dragon and hit targets all around you. This means that instead of something like the House of the Dead, where you're only shooting things right in front of you as the camera pans, you can actually be attacked from all sides, enemies can come up from behind and fly over you. You really have to pay attention and spin around and pay attention to your surroundings throughout the entire course of the game. Now, while the game is completely on rails and you really can't stop or control the dragon's forward momentum, you actually control the reins of the dragon instead of directly controlling it, and by slightly nudging it left or right you can help avoid enemy fire, and in several cases you can actually choose the different path through each level. Three of the 6 stages for the game feature different paths that you can pick. One, you're driving through a canyon and at a certain point the path splits left or right. And like I said, you cannot control the dragon directly, but if you're facing right and kind of nudging the dragon right, he'll end up taking the right path. If you nudge and are facing the left and you're targeting enemies in that direction, they'll go left. The difference being occasionally, sometimes one path has more enemies than another. Sometimes also that path will lead to one area where your dragon is on foot through the second half of that level versus flying through the air for the second half of that level. It leads to a completely different experience with entirely different enemies. Once you've played through the game several times, you can choose which paths suit your needs best. One path typically is a little bit harder than another and has more enemies, which can be a downside for less experienced players. But on the other side, there's another element to this game that really rewards you for having lots of enemies and gaining a whole ton of points. Those are dragon evolutions. Your overall path choices and your performance based on points will affect your dragon's evolution across these 6 stages. And if you want to reach the higher evolutions and have the ultimate dragon by the end, you really have to try and figure out which are some of the harder pathways to take, because you'll end up getting more points by destroying more enemies. The two things that surprised me the most in my experience with Panzer Dragoon 2 was the level of immersion and the detail of the world and the story. It honestly felt more like the world and the mythology and the expansiveness of a mini RPG in a way, and it's not really something I would typically associate with other games in this genre. The other thing was the smoothness and the accuracy of the controls. For something that was a fairly early release in the 5th gen on the Sega Saturn, I was amazed at how fluid this thing is. When you're pressing the R and L triggers and sort of spinning your view around and going up and down and just looking all over the place, there's absolutely no lag, no screen tearing, no anything. There's no real motion blur. Everything just feels perfectly smooth in a way that I was not expecting at all. Even the little sort of nudging of your dragon left or right, everything just has this perfect fluid movement that blew me away. It was something that I didn't think that early of a release that gen could really pull off. It was a ton of fun. The action really never lets up, but it's perfectly paced. It's never entirely overwhelming. When you really get into a situation where you're surrounded by tons of enemies, it just makes it that much more fun to kind of try and dodge and weave yourself around and spin around and do all these different, the auto-aiming shots, and it's just a crazy great time. And when you get down to the boss fights, are all incredibly unique. Everything is different and has a ton of replay value because of those different pathways. It's a game that's challenging, while not as challenging as the first game from what I've played. Still challenging enough that it might take you several tries to get through these 6 stages. And the different dragon evolutions and different pathways mean you're going to want to play through it many, many times. It's a lot of fun, and when you get better at the game, you can really plow through it really quickly, and it can be just a fun experience learning about this story that, as I said, gets a little bit deeper than I would expect from this type of game, and really leads up to where Panzer Dragoon's saga would take off with being an actual full-fledged RPG. It's a fascinating game that will really get you interested in this world and the mythology and the wonderful artwork. And I love how the architecture was affected by the actual ability to program on the Sega Saturn. It's an interesting thing where the game is praised a lot for how it looks, and it was actually based on trying to overcome the difficulties in creating a 3D game for the Sega Saturn that created this unique looking look to the entire game. It's fascinating, it's beautiful, the music really is very unique in a way and really fits the game. It has a wonderful tone, it's a ton of fun. It's something where if you like action games, get it. If you like RPGs with deep stories, get it. No matter what type of gamer you are, try it. There has to be something in there that you're going to like. It's a wonderful game. One of the best experiences I've had so far on the Sega Saturn, one of my favorite games for the system. I really love this game. It's just a remarkable achievement.